Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
All right, thanks.
Martin, tradition, there's plenty to drink down there.
Oh, wow. Empty one I could pee in it.
Right.
Oh, hi, my name is Martin Cisneros, and I'm an alcoholic. And they left me plenty of water up here. I can empty one and use it to pee in, probably. I heard there were some Al-Anons in the group. Is that true? There are some real Al-Anons out there? No? There is none? Yes? Raise your hands. Not a soul. Oh, one Al-Anon. Jeez. Well, there's a great Al-Anon joke. Have you heard it? This Al-Anon is standing in hell, and her arms are folded, or his arms are folded in your case, right? And it's hot, and there are flames, and there are people screaming, and a lot of pain going on, and she's standing there, he's standing there, and looking straight ahead, not bothered by it. And a soul comes over and starts yanking on her skirt or slacks, and aren't you bothered by this heat? Aren't you burning up? Aren't you feeling awful? And she's just standing there looking straight ahead and saying, it's not hot and I'm not here. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's not hot and I'm not here. And I was looking at this stage set and it reminded me of kindergarten, so I'll try not to act out. But anyway, on April 24th, and my watch doesn't have the calendar set right, but on April 24th, which is probably a few days from now, right? 3 days from now, maybe? Yeah, on April 24th, I will celebrate, probably more than likely, another birthday. And on April 24th, 1979 was when I walked into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous and took the first step. On April 24th, 1979, I admitted to my innermost self that I was a real bedwetting wino. Yeah, that's what I did. I laughed a whole bunch. I thought it was hysterical. But on April 24th, 1979, I did not have a clue that I would be standing before a bunch of other possible bedwetting alcoholics. If you haven't had the pleasure, it should be the litmus test, I think. Anyway, on April 24th, 1979, God did for me on that day what I could not do for myself. And on that day, I was not prepared for it. I didn't do a book report. I didn't do anything out of the ordinary except be drunk on that day. And on that day, it was a morning. It was a Tuesday morning, as a matter of fact, and it was probably about 9 a.m. I came to on the San Diego freeway headed north in the San Fernando Valley. I came to from a blackout driving my alcoholic automobile, which was a Chrysler New Yorker 4-door with, it was probably a 1968 or something, but it had 4 doors, it had a lot of exterior damage, and it was suffering from interior damage also. It was a terrific alcoholic car because the reservoir which holds the power steering fluid was cracked, much like the driver. And when you turn left or right, the fluid would squirt out. And like some drunks carry half a gallon of water in their trunk, I carried 3 gallons of brake fluid to refill the transmission fluid, to refill the power steering box. It might have been brake fluid. Who knows? I don't know anything about cars. So anyway, you always knew where I was going and where I wound up, following the trail of brake fluid. So me and that alcoholic car came to on the San Diego freeway, headed north, got off on Devonshire, pulled into my alcoholic home. There were two breathing, I guess, entities in the house. They were 2 golden retrievers, and they were good pals. They were drinking buddies. The female golden, her name was Cinder, and she drank champagne, she drank beer, she loved it. And the other was her son. His name was Alex, and he was the non-drinker. And I opened the door and walked in, and it's a Tuesday morning, and I hadn't yet discovered if I called my boss. I wasn't sure what was going on with all my employment stuff, but I was real nervous. When you walk in after, and the best I could remember was I started drinking on a Thursday. And I always started drinking on Thursdays because Wednesdays was like a day for not drinking. Wednesdays was a good day to kind of collect your thoughts and figure out what happened on Tuesday and Monday when you were drinking. And Thursday was a good day to kickstart the weekend, and I was off. And I was not a stranger to daily drinking. I was not a stranger to blackout drinking. If anyone doesn't know what a blackout is, like temporary amnesia for alcoholics. They just start drinking and the mind stops and the body keeps moving. It's an incredible thing. Too bad we don't have video cameras. So I came to and I walked in the house and I was not feeling all that wonderful. I was real distracted, and I was, those words, terror and bewilderment, frustration and despair, were not a part of my vocabulary in those days in 1979, but I definitely felt awful. And I thought, I need something in order, I have to call my boss, so that way I can explain my absence. One of the things I discovered early in my drinking was that as a good alcoholic, you always made sure there was plenty of adult beverage in the refrigerator. And it was usually Miller High Life, the champagne of bottled beer. 6-pack at least. And the reason I drank glass bottles was I got real tired of drinking cigarette butts out of cans. So Miller High Life, the champagne of bottled beer was great. It was a twist-off top, guys, and you could just inhale it, and you always knew how much you had left, and you always knew what was in there. And so I went in the refrigerator and drank, and just popped one and drank it down real quick, and stood by the phone ready, armed and dangerous. And I drank the beer, and nothing happened. And not like it used to in the past. And so I thought perhaps I need another. And then it came to the point where I drank a third. And at that point, everything became really confusing. And I thought perhaps it would be a good idea to take a shower and get cleaned up. And cleaned up is before back in the late 70s, getting cleaned up meant taking a shower. So I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror. And I walked in there. And you got to remember that I was no stranger to AA in 1979. Because when I walked into the room, into the bathroom and saw myself and took the first step and didn't even know it. I walked in there and I looked at myself and I saw myself for the very first time who and what I was. And at that moment I had admitted, at that moment I had surrendered. At that moment I knew that I was an alcoholic and there had to be something done other than drinking. And it wasn't news to me, because in the garage was the big book. In the garage was the big book that I had gotten from a men's stag in Encino in 1977. And that all just kind of flashed. And in that big book, there was a phone directory, and it was the names and phone numbers of the guys at the men's stag. And I think probably as I was traveling from the bathroom into the garage, you know, that group, that meeting, if I can think of it now and I can see the room no longer exists. The room fell apart during the earthquake at one time, I guess, and they moved it to another new building. But in my mind's eye, I can still see the room. And when I walked into that room for the very first time in 1977, I was introduced to the program that has continued to be with me up until this day. And that little room was a preschool room. And they had tables. They had adult tables, and they also had little itty-bitty chairs. Not those great folding guys, those hard guys, but these were already set up little guy chairs and little kids chairs. And they had a window that you could see in as you approached the building. You could see in, and as you went into the room was decorated with little guys' pictures, you know, hand drawings and stuff, and their names: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, and all those guys. And there were little drawings all tacked up on there with little gold and silver stars attached to them, and the kid of the month, the club, and blah, blah, blah. And on that day, in 1977, I met you. I met Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't know that I was going to be doing something for the rest of my life, one day at a time. I didn't know that. In 1977, I was arrested for the third and last time for drunken behavior in Chatsworth, California. Chatsworth is in the San Fernando Valley. It's kind of a woody-goody, horsey kind of country little village. And you drive through and you smell horse manure. Not as much as you used to. I mean, it's kind of cleaned up, its act now. But I lived in Encino, and in 1977, having had already 2 arrests, for one for driving under the influence and the other one's for acting out in some bar and getting my face beat in, and then arrested. In 1977, I discovered that it was not a good idea to drive around this village and being drunk. So I used to walk out of my home in Encino and hail a cab, right? And they pick you up in Encino and they drive you anywhere you want, to the airport, to the marina, to Santa Monica. You just tell them and they drive you. Well, I started my Friday or Thursday night in Encino. The cab driver said, let's go to Santa Monica. We went and they dropped me off, and I spent 2 hours or 2 days there in 1977. And then at the end of that time period, when my time ran out, I hailed another cab. And they pick you up and they deliver you. This guy did not know what the San Fernando Valley was. I didn't know that. I just said Encino, California. Pull over, I got to get some cigarettes, and I didn't tell him that I was going to get a pint of Southern Comfort. A nice thin bottle of Southern Comfort, you know, with that big top that scratches right off. It's great. And so I'm sitting in the back seat. It's a nice evening. The windows are down. I'm smoking Marlboros and drinking, Southern Comfort. And I remember getting on the freeway some point, and all of a sudden it was over. The last thing I remember in 1977, it must have been the summer or something like that, or a cool summer, was it was like being in this room and then stepping outside and catching a kind of a chill because it's cool out. That's what it felt like when I came to. There was a chill in the room. And the room that I was occupying was the back seat of this cab. I was face down into the Nagahide, where the seats kind of fold and all that lint and garbage goes in there. I must have been face down in there, inhaling this stuff, and some big guy rescued me from drowning in lint. And this guy was so huge, they literally just exhumed me from the back seat. You know how you take a nice crisp shirt and you shake it out? Well, that's what they did. LAPD does that with little guys. And in 1977, they had no problem doing that with me. And they brought me out and they shook me out and they said, pay the cab driver because we're going to take you home. And I got a little belligerent with LAPD in 1977. You don't do that. You don't do that with LAPD. And I got real snotty with them. You know, a little wimpy guy looking at a big cop with a white helmet. The black looked like Darth Vader at nighttime. And I'm looking around and I'm going, this is not Encino. And he says, no, it isn't. I said, where am I? And I'm in a parking lot, a 7-Eleven parking lot. The cab driver from some Middle East country got lost in the San Fernando Valley and did not know where Encino was and pulled over and called the cab because I was unable to help him find it. I was passed out in the back seat. And there I was, and they said, pay the cab driver, and I didn't have any money. All I had was a checkbook and a Crayola, and it was dark, and I couldn't, and they said, sign your name, and they filled in the numbers, gave them the check, and then they took me, and they cuffed me, and they took me to Devonshire. I'm 27 years old. I'm in Devonshire. I'm in jail again one more time in the San Fernando Valley. And I'm an adult guy, and I'm an only child, so I call mom and dad, and they're in their 60s, I think. And they jump in the Chevy at 3 in the morning and come and rescue me from the Devonshire division and those bad policemen. And my dad looked at me and with such disgust. You know, the first time I'd ever seen my dad look at me quite that way. When I came out of the holding cell and came out whining, you know, Daddy, they hurt me, and he told me to shut up. And I'll never forget that. But I went home and I got drunk because it hurt too much. But I knew that I was in trouble because they also said that I had to go to court and do some more stuff behind all this jazz. And in 1977, I had already performed real well for 5 years for Pac Bell. And I was a telephone lineman. And I was the littlest guy in the group. And every morning at 6:30, a bunch of linemen, once every quarter, get into a room about this size and about this many people, linemen and splicers, and this guy would come. His name was Otto. Otto now lives in Washington. I have his phone number. I'll call him. But he came to the yard, to the construction yard. And he stood up before us and he says, hi, my name is Otto, I'm an alcoholic. And he also said that he was a manager for Pac Bell and he was an installation manager. And he told us his story from the chair, and we were out there shaking, dying, you know, for a drink, because it was like Monday morning when Otto came to talk to us about his alcoholism. It's like, why are you doing this, Otto? We want to go and get drunk this morning. But Otto would do that, and he would tell us if anyone in the room was having a problem with booze to give him a call. And if we couldn't remember his number, there was a newsletter, and his name was on the number. On Monday morning after the weekend in Devonshire Division, I went and dug up the newsletter. I called Otto. And I said, Otto, I'm in deep doo-doo. And he says, why don't you go to an AA meeting? And, you know, I didn't question it. I didn't say, how come, why, who, where, when. I said, how? How do I do that? He said, there's a guy in the yard, and he'll contact you. And we're looking at a construction yard. It's like sitting in here and picking out the Al-Anon, right? How do you know? How do you know who the alcoholic is not? So I'm in a construction yard full of winos. And every day at 3 o'clock we meet at this crazy bar and shoot pool and drink beer until 1:55 a.m. and then we drink more beer for 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, you know, there's an alcoholic, there's a guy, a member of AA in this group, and the next day Kenny shows up in my face and says, Martin, I understand you want to go to an AA meeting. And Kenny looks like Robert Redford. You know, Kenny's a lineman. He's about 6'3", and he's chiseled a lot of marble, and he's got the square jaw, and he's got the arms as big as my chest. And he says, you want to go to an AA meeting? And I looked at him and I said, you're an alcoholic. And he told me, he said he had something like 3 or 5 years. I don't remember. He said there's a meeting. It's the men's stag. It's at 8:30. Thursday night, be there, and we'll start this thing. And I said I'd be more than happy to. And I was real glad that it was in Encino and I could drive to it. I was raised a Catholic, and when I pulled into that parking lot, it was St. Nicholas's Episcopalian church. And when I pulled into the driveway of that church, all of a sudden I'm thinking, Jesus, this could be sacrilegious, you know. And a Catholic entering, you know, another church grounds, it was like taboo, and I kept thinking, jeez. But I followed the light, you know, there was a light in the back, and when I pulled into the driveway of this parking lot, there were some really terrific automobiles in the parking lot. You know, I was not a dumb kid, I recognized good stuff. And I thought, maybe this isn't the right place. Sure enough, Kenny was out there at the front door, greeting, you know, talking and yakking to people, and I walked up there, and I was 27 years old. I was like a little guy. And Kenny's there at the door, and the first thing he does is he sticks out his hand and shakes my hand. Hi, Martin, good to see you. And you know, I've known Kenny for 5 years, and that's the first time, or the second time I shook his hand. Once when I met him 5 years ago, and then that night, Thursday night, he shook my hand. I'm thinking, wow. But I'm learning something already. Drunks do that whenever they see each other. They shake hands. None of the huggies came into town. Now alcoholics are hugging each other. So he shook my hand, and then he says, there's coffee, and there's donuts, and there's a seat I saved you up front. Go help yourself. And I did that. I went in the room, and I acted as if, you know, I acted like I knew what I was doing. I acted like I knew where I was going to sit. And then we sat down, the meeting got started, and everyone had like 2 and 3 packs of cigarettes at the table, and I only had 1 pack. I only had half a pack, and I thought, geez, I didn't bring enough cigarettes for this meeting. So the meeting got started, and everyone identified, and then everyone's hands went up, and my hand went up. It just shot up. You know, I didn't think much about it. I figured monkey see, monkey do. And all of a sudden, the men started yakking. It was a problem and discussion meeting in Encino that night. It was a Thursday evening. And I can still see the faces. Many of them have died, but I can still see the room is still filled. And this was when people could smoke in rooms. And secondhand smoke really does cause brain damage. Ask someone who doesn't smoke. So the room was filled with smoke, and people were talking and drinking coffee and smoking mood and mind-altering Marlboros and drinking mood and mind-altering caffeine and having a good time. But you know something about these guys? What I knew, and I didn't think about it much back then, I think about it now, is that I recognized their character in the room. There were a lot of characters in the room, but I recognized character. And I recognized a lot of these men had some real integrity. They had some real guts. They also had an ability to talk about God as they understood God, and they also talked about drinking and how they used to drink and how they didn't drink anymore and how they didn't do it one day at a time for the rest of their life, and I heard that very clear. The room was filled with drunks, bedwetting winos, much like I was. In 1977, it was way terrific. I was impressed. I was impressed with you people because I identified immediately with your drinking. That's all. And that's what was so important for me, was to know that, you know, I was in a room full of people who drank as I drank. They drank in automobiles, they drank in their homes, you know, they drank at nighttime, they drank at daytime. They drank in bars, they drank in bar parking lots. They drank on the weekends, and they drank during the weekdays. You know, they drank in the morning, they drank in the afternoon, they drank in the evenings. And they drank whether they were alone or whether they were with people. And I knew alcoholics, they all seemed very generous because they were all willing to drink with each other. And it was a room full of ex-drunks, and it was a marvelous sensation I had just sitting there and listening and laughing with them. But I was 27 years old, and I was not prepared to stop drinking. I was not ready. There's a rumor in AA, it's a bad rumor, that we suffer from an illness of a disease of denial. That must be something that happens in Egypt, because it's no longer, or never has been written in the Big Book. It says that we suffer from an illness, a malady, an allergy of the body, and an obsession of the mind. This disease of denial doesn't make any sense. That was something the AMA decided to do in order to gain more income. But in 1977, these gentlemen, they talked about their malady and their allergy. You know, if you were allergic to strawberries, you stop eating strawberries. And in the doctor's opinion, it said that over and over again, that we deal with alcohol. So anyway, these men talked about their allergy. I was 27 years old and I was not prepared. I didn't suffer from a disease of denial. I suffered from an illness of ignorance. I didn't know that I had an alcoholic problem. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I identified with their stories and their drinking patterns, but I did not think I was an alcoholic. I was just simply ignorant. And I wasn't real curious about finding out what it was all about. So I went to 20 meetings in about 20 days and had the little guy signed and went to the judge, and he proclaimed me free. And little did I know that I was not free. I was shackled. You know, I was being held by something more powerful than I guess even bars could. Metal bars, not drive-in bars. But in 1977, I decided that drinking Wild Turkey and drinking Jack Daniels and drinking a terrific kind of vodka was not a good idea. Like in the book, like when we read, you know, you're switching from scotch to brandy, I had decided to switch from vodka. I decided to switch from Jack Daniels. I decided to switch from Wild Turkey. I switched to Pagan Pink Ripple. I switched to Bally High. I switched to Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill and apple wine, an occasional Red Mountain. Because Red Mountain and Jimi Hendrix just go together. I was there. So, and from 1977 to 1979, I drank, you know, really terrific natural wines out of Tupperware glasses, and you know, you get real green on the inside, and you can witness it when it comes out, and it's awful. I had a roommate that just avoided me, and he was really a sick guy. He would hide beer in his underwear drawer, you know. He was like really crazed. I think probably he thought I was drinking too much of it and he didn't have enough, so he hid it from me. But on April 24th, 1979, after too much Strawberry Hill and Pagan Pink Ripple and Bally High and Red Mountain, it became real clear, and I walked into the garage and pulled out that big book from the shelf, you know, under the tire, I guess, and called Bill Mitchell, who is in some Winnebago traveling this country. I called him because his prefix was the same as mine. He was an Allstate insurance agent in Granada Hills. He came over in 30 minutes after I spoke to him for about 2 minutes. And he knocked on the door, and he drove up in that big Cadillac Brougham four-door job, you know, and he had a big Western hat on, and he had the Western cut jacket, and he had a big belt buckle. Big tall guy, because in the belt buckle there was like chuck wagons and Indians and cowboys and roping and all this stuff. He came in and we talked, and I don't know what we talked about, but whatever it was, he convinced me, and I said yes. He said, there's a meeting tonight at 8 o'clock, would you be willing to go? And I said yes. And it was without reservation. I didn't even have to give it a second thought. I didn't even have to check my calendar. I just said yes. And you know, down that day, Jim Mitchell sold me a policy, and the policy was in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 Steps to Recovery. People are really interested in chanting these days at meetings, principles before personalities. It's like it's some kind of thing, chanting, audience participation. But principles before personalities, in the beginning for me in that room was definitely, it was personalities. I simply really enjoyed and fell in love with the men in AA. because of their personalities. They were so clear, they were so direct, they were so honest, many of them, not all of them, but many of them. And many of them truly did have what I wanted. They had a sincere desire to stay sober and to help another alcoholic. That was it. And I discovered that that was what their primary purpose in life was to stay sober and to help another alcoholic. And that became my mission. And I didn't know it. I just didn't know it. And on April 24th, 1979, Jim Mitchell pulled up in that Cadillac, and we jumped in and went to that meeting. It was a speaker meeting. I sat right there where Mike is at, and they gave me half a cup of coffee, and I shook a bunch. And they said, anybody new in the meeting? And I raised my hand. And I stood up and said, hi, my name is Martin. I'm an alcoholic. And I probably cried. And they broke out into applause. Because what I discovered was that I was an alcoholic, and having an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And at that point, I was free. At that point, I was liberated. At that point, I didn't accept this illness. I admitted to it. I told somebody and myself and God the truth about who and what I was. And it was that simple. And it was so wonderful on that day. I knew I felt bad. And if they told me, Martin, the only thing you're going to get from this program is that you're not going to drink no more and you're going to feel 100% physically better, that would have been enough. Because I didn't know what to expect other than I just wanted to feel physically better. And that happened. And it happens for us very fast. And what I soon discovered was that, we do what other people have done here in the past. They've gotten a sponsor and they've gone through these steps and they've taken them. And because I was raised a Catholic, I had no problem with hearing words like God. I didn't understand higher power. That sounded like some kind of Protestant thing, but God I understood. So I just kind of blew past the second step, because what I discovered was that I was blessed. I truly was, because the obsession for me was lifted. The obsession for me was gone the moment I stood up and said I was an alcoholic and I was new. And that was gone. No longer has the desire to drink. The insanity has not occurred to me or happened to me, because I've taken the second step. I come to believe that there is really a God that has restored me to sanity, and I didn't even know that. So I just blew right past that and went straight to God as I understand Him. What I didn't know that I would have to do later on in this program, a few years down the road, was surrendering to booze was effortless. You know that? It really was. I had no problem giving up booze. I never had a problem giving up booze. I mean, if somebody said, Martin, you got to stop drinking for 3 days, no sweat. No sweat. On the 4th day, I was back out again. But I had no problem stopping. My difficulty was staying sober. I didn't know how. And if somebody says, here, take this big book home with you and read it, and that's how you stay sober, that wouldn't have been enough for me, because I needed people in my life to show me. I needed examples daily. So the third step became increasingly difficult over a period of time. And in my 8th year, I discovered that I had to surrender not so much to booze, but I had to surrender to God. Because this entire program is about God. That's all it is. This is a spiritual society that we're in. This is truly what we are. We are all about God and a higher power. You have to find Him now, otherwise you're going to go crazy. And I didn't want to go crazy. In fact, I was so sick I thought I was well for a long time. So I did the inventory, and I did it not right away, but I did it as best I could. I admitted to God and to myself and to somebody else the exact natures of my wrongs, and I lied, I protected, I didn't tell them the complete truth. That came later. Shortcomings and character defects, I still have them. I still probably will have them for a long time. I think they give me character. But I'm not pleased by a lot of them. They get me into a lot of trouble, which will last me for the rest of my life, because I have guilt and shame in my life, which I'm really happy about, because I need that in my life in order to keep me in track. And then made the list. My list was primarily to an ex-wife, and that was marvelous because I called her up and she said, "You know, Martin, I didn't leave you because you were an alcoholic." And then she passed the phone on to her new husband, and we spoke for a little while. And then, you know, it stuck with me. I thought, why did she leave me? Why? It's like I was a drunk. And you know what I discovered? She didn't leave me because I was a bedwetting wino, although that was really awful and humiliating for her to get up in the morning and be in a soggy mess. But, you know, she left me because I was a jerk. And I did that, you know, I made the direct amends. And what I discovered later on by some people with time, you know, the old-timers in this fellowship are really important. They are like guardrails in our lives. They keep us in check. Because oftentimes we can demand justice in this meeting, you know. Do it my way. It's like, hey, man, we come in here to change. We don't come in here to change AA. So the old-timers told me that, you know what, if you take a look at steps 10, 11, and 12, that's entirely how I can base the rest of my sober life, is to take daily inventory and when wrong, promptly admit it. Prayer and meditation, and God gives me the power to carry out His will, which is marvelous when you think about it. Alcohol used to fuel me. You know, when I drank booze, I was on fire, and I could drive anywhere, I could walk anywhere, I could be anybody, and I could do anything. Alcohol was liberating. I didn't know there was a line attached to it, but alcohol literally liberated me and gave me an imagination and sparked my character. But when I stopped, I suddenly had to turn my will and my life over to the care of God and pray for the power to carry it out. And He does that on a daily basis. I'm not as wicked and as radical as I used to be, but I can certainly break into a step or two. But on 12, and the opportunity is I have a chance to come out and speak on any given time. I actually, you know, people like what I have to say, and that gives me a good feeling. I don't like much to talk about feelings because feelings, in my opinion, some days are like farts. You know, they pass. You can't quite get a grip on them because they're just. You can share them with people if you like. But no, it does. It really does. It gives me a lot of pleasure, and it gives me a lot of. Somebody mentioned self-esteem, and when I hear self-esteem, I think about masturbation, but that's another subject. What I have today, though, is a real feeling of worth. I have a real sense of value and a sense of belonging to a fellowship of bedwetting winos, ex-drunks, like the book talks about. And I like that. I like coming to meetings and know that I'm sitting next to a real alcoholic. That helps. There are some days at some meetings where I have to ask people, you know, are you an alcoholic? And they say, no, there's something else or something other than us. And that's rather confusing some days, because there is so much out there for everybody who has any kind of other illness or disease that there are 12-step programs up the gazoo out there. So go and be there and participate in that zoo and leave us the hell alone. Because we are a fellowship, we are a spiritual fellowship, we are a society of alcoholics. And remember, we deal with alcohol. / cunning, baffling, powerful. It doesn't say and of this and and of that and and of that. On my last note, other than saying what I've said, is that there was, and I'm still having a wave of emotion behind it. It was 72 hours ago, a town in our country a building was blown to shreds. And Angel, my lifelong partner, suggested, and she did, she just took the action. She didn't get my permission, she just did it. She looked up the central office in Oklahoma City and mailed them a check, because undoubtedly, because of the amount of people that were killed, there was probably some sober drunks in that building. And I'm sure that there is an Oklahoma City central office, and the people and the family members that remain. You know, every prayer and every thought and every little bit that we can do helps tremendously. Our society outside of this society is in danger from radical ideas. And thank God we're a fellowship where we have a 12-step and a big book with 164 pages of truth that do not have to be changed. We can preserve them forever, and they will do what they did in 1935. They can do what they did then in 1995 and continue going on into infinitum, is to help one drunk recover from alcoholism. And the words are in there, and they're perfect, and they're profound, and they're God's gift. And we must not change them, and we must not add to this program. We must be true to our illness, our malady, our allergy, because we can recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body with God's help. Thanks a whole bunch.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button. swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.